put it in a box and put it on a ship and send it over here? Well, I don't know. How do you do that? And but I found out that what that means is that countries around the world are in worse shape than the United States when it comes to their currency. You know, you've all seen the picture of Zimbabwean kids carrying these billion-dollar notes around, trillion-dollar notes, going to buy lunch or something. Well, a lot of countries may not be that extreme, but they have badly eroded currencies, and it's impossible to do any meaningful commercial venture using the native currencies. And so while they may use the native currencies for a bottle of milk or a can of Coca-Cola or something like that, if it comes to a real estate transaction or a business transaction, they use American dollars. It has been the almost universally accepted international money. And so all of these countries of the world were demanding dollars so they could use them in their own countries to replace their own debauched currencies. So there was this constant demand for American dollars. No matter how many they seemed to make of them, they could always ship them overseas to Europe or Asia or Africa. They call them euro dollars, but they're all over the world. And so we were spared the inflationary effect of having that money remain on our shores. Well, now that these countries are waking up to the fact that maybe Uncle Sam isn't going to be able to make good on these dollars anymore, or pay interest on the loans, or maybe Uncle Sam is going to go down the tubes, or whatever reason they think that these dollars aren't going to be so useful anymore, they're looking for other alternatives, and they're turning to other currencies. They're turning to the euro. A lot of them are turning to gold and silver, believe it or not. And so there's less and less demand for these American dollars. They're beginning to come back, although not in great numbers yet. I think you should anticipate that they could suddenly come back in huge numbers. All of these euro dollars that have been overseas, we may wake up some morning and look out over the ocean and there'll be this cloud of birds, and dollars like birds flying in like pigeons coming to our shore. And when they get here, we'll be covered with bird dropping feathers or something like that. All this money will come back and we'll begin to see the inflationary effect of this money. At the same time, though, the foreign countries will not be buying our debt, which means that the Federal Reserve will be having to pick up that shortfall that I mentioned earlier in larger and larger numbers. So the effect of those two things together, to me, are harbingers of nothing but inflation. In spite of the fact that, yes, money is going out of existence in large quantities, we have to think in terms of the mentality of these people running the show in Washington. They've got one solution for all problems, and that's to turn on the Federal Reserve presses. Mind you, they don't print the money, but they'll create the money out of nothing. A rebellion almost never works. In fact, I cannot think of any instance in history when a rebellion really worked, except for a very short period of time, and then later it was squelched. Revolutions often work. And the reason is that there's the difference between the two. A rebellion is just a mass uprising of people who are fed up. They can't take it anymore, as the line goes in that, what is that, network? No. That network. I'm not going to take it anymore. Well, that's a rebellion. That's the chant of a rebellion. And so people often will wind up in the streets with nothing but baseball bats or pitchforks or something like that against the militarized state. They have no leadership. They have no plan, no strategy, no funding, no communications, no training. They have no ideals. They don't know what they want. All they know is what they don't want. They're going to overthrow the established regime, they think. And in every case, they're put down. It just takes time for the militarized system to wait until the fervor calms down a little bit, and then when the people get hungry and tired and they start going home, like in Hungary, they just seal the city with a ring of tanks and then crush the revolt. It always happens. And in this country today, you have no idea, nor do I, for that matter, but I have an inkling of what weapons are in the possession of the federal government. Weapons of crowd control, mass destruction, but particularly crowd control, they like to call it. Everything from these piercing audio sounds that they generate, drive people running away. Everything from that to kind of a microwave dish. They've already demonstrated this. They can aim a microwave at a crowd of people, and everybody all of a sudden feels like they're on fire. Starts to cook the tissue underneath the skin. And there's nobody that can stand that. They all run away, of course. And they say, well, it's a non-lethal weapon for 1 second at a time. If they leave the switch on, it will not be a non-lethal weapon. You have no idea what they've got. And the idea that a bunch of people, disorganized, with no military expertise, no weapons to speak of, they practically got America disarmed. They don't even have pea shooters anymore because they're so worried about a criminal sneaking into their house. It would not be an even shot. Compare that with the American Revolution. People like to think, as I did as a young boy, I thought the farmers in Massachusetts just grabbed their muskets and met the British at the Concord Bridge and faced them down. No. The farmers did meet them at the bridge, but they were part of a militia. Those farmers had worked together, trained together. They were part of a militia that belonged to the government. There were 13 governments that unified. Each government was a fighting machine. In fact, they'd been engaged in wars a lot of those years against each other and against the French up in Quebec. They knew how to fight. They had leadership, they had governments, they had courts, they had representatives, they had jails, they had armories, they had taxes, they had laws, they had military command, they had everything ready to carry out a revolution. It was a true revolution. There's nothing like that in place right now in the United States. So all we can talk about, even though we use the word revolution, we're just talking about a revolt. It'd be the greatest bloodbath of all history. And I shudder when I hear people thinking that this is somehow going to be the solution. And I also know that our enemies, our collectivist enemies, want that to happen. They can hardly wait. I am convinced from what I've seen that they have their own agents provocateurs in our midst who are agitating for just that sort of thing, to draw people into the streets, to precipitate a revolt, so that they can have a justification for martial law. That's part of the plan. These people are expert at leading their own opposition. Don't forget that. They don't wait for legitimate opposition. They think ahead. They have their think tanks. They say, you know what? The American people are going to be very upset at some point. They're going to start to want to revolt. And they say, okay, fine. Let us provide the leadership for it to make sure that it does not succeed. Do we have any chance at all in this country of a true revolution? Yes. We have states. We have governments, states, all of which have military forces, all of which have all the functions of the 13 colonies, and we could, theoretically at least, reproduce the American Revolution if the states would get backbone. If we could move into the assemblies of our states and have influence there, that means a lot of cleaning of houses, a lot of new names at the state level. We talk about the federal level always. You know how I feel on that. We've got to replace those guys in Washington, but even more important, we've got a lot of people at the state legislature that needs to be replaced. If we can do that, now we're beginning to recapture the country in a very generic, in a very fundamental way. The states are the origin of this nation. They should be and can be the power for this nation. They could be the genesis of a true revolution for freedom. Well, I'll start with the thing that everybody knows and everybody comes up with, which is get out of debt. There's nothing new about that. But it does need a little bit of examination. Is all debt bad, even today? No, no, it's not. There's a difference between